DW Africa Link.
It's a very ambitious initiative. I'm talking about Mission 300, an initiative launched by the World Bank Group and the African Development Bank in April 2024. The mission aims to provide 300 million people in Sub-Saharan Africa with access to sustainable electricity by 2030. That would help address the critical energy access gap where nearly 600 million Africans lack reliable electricity. Now, without trying to sound like a pessimist, I wonder how realistic it is to achieve this in 5 years, and how can leaders walk the talk? That's what's coming up. I am Eddy Micah Jr, and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
The Mission 300 Africa Energy Summit was recently held in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, in January 2025. More than 20 African leaders met to discuss solutions to addressing the urgent need for reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy to drive economic growth and development across the continent. The summit highlighted several key strategies and commitments and seeks to transform Africa's energy sector through infrastructure, investments, and policy reforms. So is it mission possible or mission impossible? Let's get more from Patenus Niyigira, public sector policy analyst based in Tanzania. He closely followed the Mission 300 summit. I also have DW correspondent in Tanzania, Naomi Achieng. Hello and welcome to Africa Link. Naomi, you covered the Mission 300 summit. What were some of the highlights?
Eddy, there were several highlights in this Africa Energy Summit. And one major topic was how they are planning to provide energy access to 300 million people in Africa by 2030. And that means reliable, affordable, and sustainable electricity. And they also talked about how this could really enhance the quality of life by creating more jobs and more opportunities across the continent. And then there was a discussion about needing stronger partnerships between the public and private sectors, along with the development partners to come up with solid financing strategies. And Eddy, actually, this summit ended with something called the Salaam Energy Declaration. This one is said to outline strategies to lower electricity costs and reduce reliance on firewood and increase clean energy production. So it really feels like this declaration could offer hope for a brighter, more sustainable future for millions of people across Africa. So this was what were discussed in that summit.
Well, that's good to know. At least on paper, it seems it was a solid discussion, which is the term I use for a pretty good discussion. But how optimistic overall were people, Naomi, that you spoke to? Was this, seen as just another summit where people are talking but may not walk the talk, or how optimistic were they that this could actually, happen?
They are so excited and they are so much confident that this summit is going to work. By 2030, they are going to get a positive impact through that summit. Okay.
So overall optimism. But let me come to you, Patenus, because, as I said earlier, you followed the Mission 300 summit. First of all, how important is such a summit for Africa and its energy needs? Let's start with that.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, when you bring stakeholders together and you have something to iron out, especially the question of energy, it is so crucial that you get diverse views and you understand what the obstacle might be. And when you look at Africa, it is a need. It is a fundamental need. It's not just a demand, but a need. And so it is so important when you gather the Africans together and look on possible ways on how they can finance, but also how they can bring a question of policy framework together and see how they work together as an Africa continent. So that's how I can say important it is.
Right. Very important, no doubt. And you mentioned a very important point about this is not even a demand, this is a need. Give us an idea generally. How bad is it when we talk about Africa's current energy needs and the supply that is available?
It is in terms of the financial capacity and the capacities in terms of technical know-how on how to harness the existing natural resources like wind, solar, and all such. And Africa is somehow behind to a great extent when you compare to the developed nations. And this has been a serious obstacle simply because of today we are talking of innovation and development of such nature, the use of internet and the current changes in environmental changes, which in one way or the other demand the economy to be electrified. You look on the financial systems, for example, the banks and all such. So it is real. I don't want to term, as you have said, it bad. It really requires some dramatic change and a radical kind of decisions to move.
Again, clearly very important. But I guess the natural question is why, with all the resources that you talk about Africa having, why have many countries sort of lagged behind in providing energy needs? Is it just a case of the financial aspect?
Yes, one case of financial aspect, but also the case of economic development. When we speak of that, we connect it with the political leadership, with the community advocacy on how to use and utilize the natural resources they have by their alternative means. And you know, Africa is taken up by modernization. So when we speak of anything, we talk of having a sophisticated kind of systems to run our systems or to run our alternative source of energy. And this is a serious issue. That's number one. Number two, we have issues to deal with the leadership, political leadership. The leadership we have is, I may say, is kind of lacking the know-how and the skills needed to bring the technocrats together, to bring the people or stakeholders together and be able to forge a way out. The divide between the private sector vis-a-vis the public sector is as if they don't communicate in all together, whereby now you be able to diversify. For example, when you talk of Tanzania, you have only one institution which monopolizes everything when it comes to the issue of power. You don't have alternative sources. So you can't even compare prices. You either take or leave. But if there was a proper understanding of how the private sector vis-a-vis public can work together, I think we can have a better way of how we can deal with the issue of energy. So we are in between in that angle.
Okay. And Naomi, again, focusing on the summit, do we have an idea, the kind of new strategies these leaders propose to ensure that, millions have access to electricity in Africa? Because it cannot be the same strategy that is being used because that hasn't yielded good results. So what are some of the new strategies they talked about, Naomi?
Eddy, as far as I know, the goal of this summit was to boost renewable energy and attract private investment and ensure that our power systems are efficient and cost-effective. So to achieve this, they will need to upgrade and expand the power infrastructure while keeping costs low and competitive. So those 300 million people have access to electricity. And another strategy could be something like collaboration across countries. I think it will be essential for sharing energy resources such as hydro, maybe solar, as Nieriga said, wind or gas. It's also important to create new policies that encourage private sector investment and strengthen Africa's electricity industry. And also women, ensuring women benefit from energy access to and have opportunities in the sector is crucial. So as reaching more women means reaching more households. You see, and in short, I can say strategies can power Africa in a smart, sustainable, and inclusive way.
So, Patenis, after asking the question, just so people know what has happened, you lost your energy, right? Basically, the power, yes. The lights went out. And this is why it's important that, the 300 million people, even more than that, has access to energy. But back to the question I was asking Patenis, it sounds all funny, but it's really not a funny situation. That, again, considering all the resources that Africa has at its disposal, people still have to struggle when it comes to electricity, right? Access to electricity. But again, we're talking about 300 million people, according to this summit, by 2030 in Sub-Saharan Africa having access to energy. Is that ambitious, or what do you make of that?
It is very ambitious, because when you speak of 5 years from now, and these nations, when you look at their strategy towards energy accessibility, it is not something to joke with. At least in Tanzania, when you look at Tanzania, to about 13,505 villages needed to be connected with electricity. Now, almost up to now, 11,000 have been connected according to the statistics we have. But now the challenge is we don't get consistently. We don't have it efficiently. As we were discussing now, you saw, I told you things have gone differently. If at all I had no laptop or this, I should have been off. So the challenge is that. So for me, I see they were too ambitious. They did not consider each nation's capacity on infrastructures they have and how they have defined and diversified the question of energy and how financially they are. They didn't consider that. Despite, yes, they had promises of some billions of dollars to make that, the story is the money is not yet in the account. So it's still a promise. So when I look at it, it may be just a political talk to some extent.
And this is the challenge, isn't it? Because there's a lot of these summits, there's a lot of, positive talk, but it just doesn't seem realistic. Or are we just being too pessimistic? Because if all hands, were put on deck, all countries coming together in some ways with the support of regional bodies, it's not necessarily impossible, is it?
It is not impossible if they have political will. And if they actually were discussing on how to get them off in their seats as presidents, they will come with solutions which can work in 2 days, 3 days. They can come with that solutions. But now, because we are speaking a larger and a bigger concern of the 300 million people, it won't. Because we see even nationalized budget. If you look, for example, the Tanzanian budget, how much is taken into development projects, is out of 100% is almost 30, 20, up to 40%. And the money to be dispatched to all the necessary ministerials and the councils and mention the municipals, you find almost 18% has been given. So it is still a serious issue. And when it's now internationalized like this, I think it becomes more complex than being localized.
Right. Naomi, let me come to you. You being inside Tanzania, I think you touched on it a bit earlier. Patenis also added a bit to it. But Tanzania hosted this particular summit about, boosting Africa's energy needs. What is the exact situation in Tanzania in terms of how it's addressing its energy needs?
Eddy, like many other African countries, also in Tanzania, we face challenges. in accessing reliable electricity. And however, we are surely still making a progress. As President Samia talked about this on that summit, she mentioned that more villages now have access to the electricity, and the government expects to reach even more in the future. So I think we are going in a good way. So maybe we can have a time where we can give a government a time of that 2030, maybe we're going to be in a good place.
Right. But what is the main challenge? Is the challenge more the money available for Tanzania to address the challenges, or is it the know-how? What is it? Why isn't Tanzania fully self-sufficient with energy needs?
The big challenge is when you hear about the statement from the government, maybe always when electricity went off, sometimes they come with low water in some rivers here in Tanzania. And sometimes they say that it is normal challenges, but I don't know how to put it, but it is still a challenge here in Tanzania, and not only in big cities. So even here in the cities, we have a challenge like this. So you can think about the people who are living in villages, interior areas. So it is still a challenge. So the government need more effort to make that thing to be in a good. So even cities we can remove that challenges so that it will be a good opportunity for the government to go and deal with this on villages, so that people across the continent, we can have this good electricity and remove this challenge of electricity.
And indeed, it is what we're calling it, a very big challenge. Pattern is some or many African countries are dependent on the water bodies, or the water as a resource to generate energy. Now we're talking about climate change, which is obviously impacting some of these water bodies. That makes it obviously challenging to provide the much needed electricity or energy. How big a challenge is climate change really, and what's the way to go around it?
Climate change is a serious issue, it's a serious challenge actually. And some parts of Africa are surrounded with water bodies, and the thing, what they could use is water bodies. But over time, we have failed actually to harness the existence of our water bodies. And today we are speaking on solar energy and wind energy and some other alternative sources, of which I think needs a high capacity in technology and innovation to be able to harness those systems. Now, if that, it requires a lot of money, and our budget is small. Our tax base are still not reliable. We don't collect enough as we spend. And so therefore we still need a lot of support, a big support from the international community, the donors, and what actually Naomi said, regional energy integration kind of. For example, if we can be able to strengthen our role in the regions and work collaboratively as a single pool. Let's say, for example, East Africa, the Eastern African Power Pool, or the Central African Power Pool, or African Power Pool, where we can be able to have a consistent kind of contribution that can make us come up with a reliable system, a reliable means of financing it in terms of capacity, but also to generate enough power that can save and suffice the needs of the users. So what we are having, for example, here in Tanzania, a good step has been made by the government, commendable step. We had the 13,585 villages to be connected with the under we call the Rare Energy Agency. Still is an issue because the electricity is not enough. So what we need is to produce what is enough for the needs of the economy and to have some surplus, which when we have an emergency such like climate change, we can still have means to survive. But currently we are in the dark, as it is a dark continent.
Right. I mean, one thing you talk about is international support. We all know what's going on now in the world, don't we? With the U.S., which is one of the major supporters of aid of all kinds to the African continent. And one day that the light is turned off, basically from the U.S. Now that sort of dependency is now going to cause a challenge on the continent. So I guess my question to you then is, looking within the continent, being self-sufficient, knowing, of course, the different levels of, the different levels of the economic situation that different countries are in, what really must be done within, and what role can the regional bodies, play in all of this?
The role of regional bodies is critical because what is going on currently worldwide, especially when we talk the role of America in its foreign policy and international development, it is an eye opener for us to sit like the regional bodies or the African bodies, where we can be able to see how we can finance ourselves. And this will help us to diversify our means of revenue tax correction and expand our tax base, but also to have a collaborative kind of policies that can be able to link each other in a better and more fashionable way that can lead us to use what actually we have as without requiring much of energy, without requiring much of resources. If we can be able to tap into that, is possible. But now the regions, I said, why we need international support is because we are not organized internally. If Africa could be organized and they have serious, strong
but why are we? Why it really hurts my heart to hear that. Why are we not organized properly? Because that's a big problem, isn't it?
Yes, it's a big problem. We are not organized properly with the number of things. They are internal, and external. The internal one, I may say, we don't have technical know-how, proper technical know-how that gets into the root cause of our issues.
But why don't we have, again, I'm sorry, I have to push you again there. Why don't we have the technical know-how? Because surely it's not because we are Africans. Is it because of a lack of investment by the government, into making sure that its personnel have the required knowledge? Is it an educational system? Is it the technical know-how facilities that we don't have? What's going on?
I may take your first line of the government is not doing what is enough to ensure that we have good education systems which can reflect the needs of the people. Our education system is still fragile, and the things which we are taught are not related with the running the economy of the 21st century, and the politics itself, the rule of law, democratization process, which brings all together and work in a better fashion, is not properly set in place.
Yeah, that was a little bit depressing. I don't know, Naomi, if you have anything more uplifting to add to this as we try to wrap this up, in terms of, based on what you got from the summit, based on what you've heard from the people you've been speaking to, the Agenda 2030 of providing electricity to 300 million people from Sub-Saharan Africa. Based on all of that, how confident are you that we will get there, Naomi?
Yes, if you're going to deal on what they're planning on that summit. So if we follow what we're planning, so we are going to succeed.
I like the way you said that, because if we follow what we plan, if we walk the talk, we are going to succeed. But Patenis, that is what makes us cautiously optimistic, if we want to be optimistic at all, right? That most of the time, as we've talked about it earlier, it seems ambitious, and the challenge would be if leaders will actually walk the talk, isn't it, Patenis?
Yes, if they walk the talk, at least. But we still with the one challenge. The financing part of it is what worries me most.
Thank you very much for your contributions, Patenus Neyigira, public sector policy analyst based in Tanzania, and also DW correspondent in Tanzania, Naomi Achieng.
Now, while Mission 300 has garnered significant financial support and political will, several factors will determine the feasibility of its goals. Governments, the private sector, and development partners must work together to mobilize resources, implement policy reforms, and promote sustainable energy solutions. So what do you think? Please share your thoughts with us on our Facebook page, DW Africa. Listen to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. And hey, don't forget to click follow and subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Kaleji. And I am Eddy Micah Jr. Thanks for listening.
DW News.
Here are today's top news stories and why they matter. Confirmed Ebola cases in Uganda have now risen to 9 from 3, with 1 person dead. The country's health ministry said in a statement late on Monday that 7 of the 9 cases were being treated in a hospital in the capital, Kampala. One other case is being treated in a hospital in the eastern city of Mbale, near the Kenyan border. So how are Ugandans reacting and what are officials doing to contain the spread? Frank Higa in Kampala has more to report.
Panic and fear gripped some Ugandans after the health ministry declared an outbreak of the Sudan strain of Ebola virus disease last month. An employee of Mulago Hospital who died of the disease was the first case to be identified. His wife, son and brother